Hi, 10th grade. Welcome to your biology video for Tuesday, May 5th. I have an announcement to make. We need to have our last test sometime this week, and I just learned about that last Thursday at a faculty meeting that we had online, and so I'm going to make our last test tomorrow, Wednesday, May 6th, and I know that that's short notice, but I also know that the information that the test is going to be on, which is Introduction to Human Anatomy, the integumentary system, the skeletal system, and the muscular system are things that we've already covered and that you should already have notes on. And of course, I know that your tests are all open notes and open books. So I don't really think it would be a problem for you to have a test tomorrow, but if you find that it doesn't fit well in your schedule, or you would like to have time to review the material on your own before you take the test, even though it's open notes, open book, I totally understand that, and I don't like to spring things on you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you basically the whole day, to like my whole time that's allotted to you tomorrow to take the test. But if you don't have time to take it tomorrow, or if you'd rather take it a little bit later, it's okay with me if you take it Thursday instead, or Friday on your catch-up day, or even Saturday. It doesn't matter to me. So what I'll do is I'll make the due date for the test be like the end of the day Saturday. So you take it when you feel like you're ready. If that's tomorrow, great. If not, then do it when you need to. And I'm sorry to throw that on you, and we won't have had any quizzes on that material before your test. But again, I mean, since it's all open notes and open book, I don't think that's probably going to be a problem for you. But you can let me know if it is, and I can work with you individually if I need to. Okay, so that's tomorrow. This week we're going to focus on two more human body systems, the respiratory system and the digestive system. And we're going to start with the respiratory system. And I'm just going to go through some notes that I would have given you in class were we together. And then I'll show you a couple of videos, and that'll kind of be it. As you know, if we were together, you would be dissecting out these systems in the rat. They're very easy to see and kind of fun to explore. I think you actually get to take the whole respiratory system out of the rat with the trachea and the lungs, and then the whole digestive system, and spread it all out and see how long the small intestine is, all that stuff. So I will also include a couple of videos that show the respiratory system and the digestive system dissection in the rat, like I did with the muscular and the skeletal systems, so that you could get a taste for or that's probably not a good choice of words, a sense of what we would have done if we had been together. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with the respiratory system notes now, and we'll cover the digestive system on Thursday. So let me find, I need to find my notes so that I can share them with you. Here they are. Okay, so about the respiratory system, the main thing that I want you to remember is it's the job of the respiratory system, along with the digestive system, to provide for the energy needs of the organism, and we're talking about humans specifically. And we have to go back to your favorite formula, the formula for aerobic cellular respiration. And remember that in order for a cell to have the energy it needs to do its work, that cell has to be provided with oxygen and sugar. And what that cell does in a human body within its mitochondria is break down the sugar molecule to release the energy in the sugar molecule's bonds and to capture that energy in the form of ATP. But that breakdown of the sugar molecule has to be done in the presence of oxygen. And in the process, CO2 is made and water is formed. So the respiratory system's part in this, in providing for aerobic cellular respiration, of course, is to bring to make sure the body has oxygen that's needed for aerobic cellular respiration, and to get rid of the carbon dioxide that is formed during aerobic cellular respiration. Now, we won't talk about the digestive system's role specifically today, but I think you could probably pretty easily see that the digestive system's job is to bring sugar, to take food that we ingest and to break it down into smaller fragments and finally into like molecular size fragments, including sugar. And then the circulatory system sends that sugar to the cells where they can use that sugar to make ATP. So these two systems work together to provide for the energy needs of the body. And what I'm going to do is go through, so again, the function is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide to and from the blood. That's the function of the respiratory system. And then once those gases are in the blood, of course, it's the circulatory system's job to carry them to wherever they're needed in the body. Okay, so this part here, and I've included these notes for you on the LMS, goes through the basic structures of the respiratory system and kind of tells you what each part does and a little more about each part. And then at the bottom, it shows you a schematic of how oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in the lungs. So I'm going to go through this information as I'm showing you some diagrams from your book. So I'm not going to stay focused on this, if you want to call it slide. I'm going to instead go through these points while we're looking at a diagram from your book. So let's start with just the general structures of the respiratory system. And okay, I better do, yeah, sorry. All right, this should be good. So what I'm showing you now is a sagittal, what we call a, well, I say sagittal, but I'm not sure it's sagittal now that I think about it. So let's just not say that. It's if you cut the head this way and you're looking inside at the air passageways in the human body. And so of course you have the nasal cavity, which is up here, up your nostril. And then at the back of that nasal cavity, you reach the pharynx area, which is right here. And here's the mouth cavity, or what's called the buccal cavity, and it also leads into the pharynx. So the pharynx is a shared passageway for food from the mouth and air from the nose. Of course, we can breathe through our mouth as well. It's best if we breathe through our nose because our nose is designed to moisturize the air and to filter out bad stuff from it. But of course, we all know we can breathe with our mouths too. And so from the pharynx, if we're talking about air, it travels through the larynx, which is our voice box, and then down into our trachea, which is our windpipe. And we'll look at that in more detail in a minute. If we were talking about food coming through the mouth cavity or the buccal cavity and being swallowed down the pharynx, then the food would slide down the muscular tube, which is the esophagus. And while we're swallowing, our epiglottis, the little flap of tissue, comes and covers over the top of our larynx, the top of our voice box, so that we don't get food down in our respiratory system. Okay, so we have the nose, the pharynx, and the larynx, and the trachea shown here. Okay, from the trachea, so here's our larynx, there's the voice box. And so the air goes through the larynx, through the trachea, and then it can branch into the right bronchus and the left bronchus. And from the So these are the bronchi, that's the plural, and each bronchus leads to a lung. And inside the lung, the bronchus, so here's the left bronchus, divides into smaller tubes called bronchial tubes. And then those tubes branch into even smaller tubes called bronchioles. And at the end of the bronchioles, we have these little sacs. They're showing you right here. So here we're at the end of the bronchioles. They end in these little sacs that look sort of like clusters of grapes. They're little air sacs called alveoli. And each cluster of alveoli is surrounded by what's called a capillary bed. So you have blood vessels that run right next to each little alveolus and allow for exchange of materials between the blood in these capillaries and the air inside this alveolus. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute, but that's the general kind of schematic of the general layout of the respiratory system. Remember, the whole goal of the respiratory system is to get oxygen into the blood, oxygen that's in the lungs into the blood, and carbon dioxide that's in the blood, that's waste, out of the blood and into the lungs so that it can be exhaled. Okay, so now we'll go through each part in a little more detail. Okay, so this is the nasal cavity. So of course that's part of your nose, and your nose is lined with what's called ciliated mucous membrane. And the cilia are just what you know them to be, little hair-like structures that can move back and forth in concert. And their job is to trap like dust and smoke and bacteria, other things like that, and to gently move whatever they've trapped down to the back of the nasal cavity, into the throat, into the pharynx, where it can be swallowed down the esophagus. And then once it hits the stomach acid, your body basically destroys it. And as I said, the nose is also designed to warm the air that comes into your body and moisten it. So ideally, we breathe through our nose. The pharynx, as I said, is the throat. It also has ciliated mucous membrane, as I was just telling you. And so it also has little hair-like structures that keep moving the mucus from your nose down to the back of your throat and into your esophagus. That's why sometimes when you have a cold, you can feel like there's what's called a post-nasal drip or a behind-the-nose drip. That's because you have so much mucus being produced that it's like you can feel it dripping down the back of your throat. Okay, we said that both air and food move through the pharynx, but if it's air, it's gonna come over here into the larynx. The larynx is the voice box, and it leads to the trachea, and it houses the vocal cords. So I have to go to a different picture to show you the vocal cords. Let me see if I have that picture up. No, I do not. So let me see if I can bring that up here. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is a picture showing the human vocal cords. And so you may remember in 7th grade, I showed you a video where we, there we go. Okay, where I showed you a picture of where they took a camera and put it up the nose of 4 different singers, 1 camera for each singer, and let the camera rest right on top of the voice box, and then filmed the vocal cords while the people were singing. And I've included that video as a link in the videos for today, and you can, if you didn't get to watch it or if you want to rewatch it, you can. But here's what it looks like if we're looking down on top of our voice box. So looking straight down onto this structure right here, which is sometimes called your Adam's apple. If we're just breathing, we're not trying to talk, then these are our vocal cords and they're relaxed. And this area, that's the space between the vocal cords, which is called the glottis, is wide open and air just easily moves in and out. If we're trying to produce sound, then the larynx compresses a little bit and these vocal cords are drawn really tight, and then we force air over those tight bands of tissue and they vibrate, and when they vibrate they make a sound, and of course that's how we sing or talk or make other types of sounds through our mouth. Okay, so that's the larynx, and just remember that there's a flap of tissue. It's right shown right here. That's the epiglottis, and when we swallow food or water, that flap closes over, comes up and closes over. This open, I'm pointing to the screen with my finger, sorry, closes over the glottis so that no food can go down into your larynx. Okay. So, I think I need to go back to okay. All right, I'm clumsy with this, obviously. Okay, the next structure we're going to talk about is the trachea. The trachea has these little white bands on the drawing because those represent the cartilaginous rings, and they're sort of like the like a spring almost that sits along the length of the windpipe and holds that tube open all the time. That's in contrast to like our esophagus, which doesn't stay open all the time. It's sort of, esophagus is kind of like a sock. It's just flat unless something's going through it, like a foot. But a trachea is more like a vacuum cleaner hose where it always stays open, so that we don't, so that air can always be going through it without it having to force its way through. Your trachea also has the ciliated mucous membrane. In this case, in your trachea, the ciliated mucous membrane would be making whatever might be trapped in the larynx come up, so that it can be swallowed down away from the lungs, because you just want to keep those kinds of, anything dangerous you want to have out of your lungs. Your lungs need to be free to do what they are meant to do. Okay, the bronchi, I don't really have much to tell you about them. They're smaller tubes that also have cartilaginous rings that stay open. Then we get to the lungs, which are shown here. And your right lung has 3 lobes, and they don't really show it clearly here, the 3 lobes, well, sort of, like, but not really. And your left lung only has 2 lobes. And as I told you before, your lungs themselves are mostly made of bronchioles, and lots and lots of bronchioles, because these keep branching into microscopic passageways. And then, of course, your alveoli. If you could spread out the total inner surface area of all these different tubes, it would take about half of a tennis court. So it's a lot of surface area for gas exchange. There's no cilia or cartilage in the bronchioles. They just stay open. Each bronchiole ends in an alveoli. Again, the alveoli are these just like bubble-like sacs. There's about 300 million of these little bubbles, little sacs in your lungs. And this is where gas exchange happens. So every other part of the respiratory system is basically just sort of like piping to get to the place where the action actually happens and the gas is exchanged. Okay, one thing I should mention, because it's on your note sheet, is that we have membranes that are inside of our chest cavity, our thoracic cavity, and that surround our lungs, that keep that surface moist and lubricated, so that as our lungs are expanding and contracting over and over again, they don't get irritated or damaged. It's like well-oiled, if you want to say. And that membrane here is shown right there, this like sac around the lungs. Sometimes people get fluid around their lungs. That's what they mean by that. This part here can get, I think it's called pleuritis, but I'm not sure. And it can get, you can get like an infection in there or inflammation in there. Okay, so lastly, we just want to hit on how the gas is actually exchanged. And this is actually not a hard concept at all for you, I hope, because it's just based on diffusion. So remember that the diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to low concentration. And so when you breathe fresh air into your lungs, so it's oxygen rich inside of your lung, and this is showing you the inside of one of these sacs right here. This is the inside of one of the sacs. A blood vessel, which is shown here, and you can tell because those are red blood cells that are in this tube that's running around the capillary. So we're looking inside one of these right here. That's what this is. And then we're looking inside one of those bubbles, and that's what this is. So when you breathe in, this air has lots of oxygen, but this blood that's coming from the lungs doesn't have much oxygen. It's not coming from the lungs, it's coming from the heart, sorry. And it's just been through the entire body, is very oxygen poor. So the oxygen will diffuse from where there's a high concentration of oxygen in the alveolus to where there's a low concentration of oxygen in the bloodstream. So oxygen moves from the alveolus to the bloodstream. And then conversely, there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream because this blood has just been through the whole body and has given away most of its oxygen, but it has picked up a lot of carbon dioxide from the cells because of the waste from aerobic cellular respiration. So high carbon dioxide, low carbon dioxide in the alveolus, so the carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the capillary and into the alveolus. Then we exhale, and that carbon dioxide gets forced out, and it starts all over again when we breathe in. Inhale again, oxygen-rich air, so oxygen diffuses out of the alveolus, carbon dioxide, low air in the alveolus, but high carbon dioxide in the blood capillary, and so it will move to the alveolus and over and over and over again. And that is explained really well on pages 521 to 522 of your book. So if that seems a little fuzzy to you, feel free to look that up a little bit more. Okay, so that was a lot, but that's pretty much the gist of the respiratory system. And like I said, I'm going to give you just a couple of videos to watch. They won't be long, to kind of give you an animated take of the information that I just gave you. And like I said, I'll also include some videos that show people dissecting out the respiratory system of the rat so that you can see. I hope y'all have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.